Photographers, the classic question remains, black and white or color? In this video, we explore the debate that divides the photography world. Black and white or color? Photographers, let's settle this.
The story makes it clear that
It gets personal, Clays. Shade feels so threatened by Chroma, by what...
no kidding. It makes you wonder, what is it about these two approaches to art? The honesty of Shade's black and white, or the hope in Chroma's color? Perspectives, that's when we really start to grow, you know?
Absolutely. So this duel, this clash of visions, how does it all play out? I imagine things get pretty interesting and monotone.
For that raw emotion, capturing the textures of the buildings, the lines on people's feet, the surface of Monoton. There's a scene where she photographs these kids. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But then you have these other people, and they're drawn to Chroma's work.
World, and it seems like there's no middle ground. How does the story resolve this?
Elder just looks at everyone and asks, why must we choose?
Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at something pretty interesting, the whole idea of art and how we see things, you know, like what shapes our perspective. And we've got some really cool material to dig into for this one. It's a fictional story called Pasted Text, The Duel of Light and Color.
And it's a fascinating story. It really makes you think.
Yeah, and it all starts with this town, Monoton, where everything exists in shades of gray.
And I mean everything, not just like the buildings or the clothes people wear. The story makes it clear that even like how they think, their emotions is all kind of stuck in this grayscale existence.
It's like they're trapped in an old photograph or something.
Right.
Frozen in time. And what I find really interesting is how the story links this whole lack of color to this feeling of everything being stuck, like time itself has just stopped moving forward in Monoton. What do you think about that?
Well, it's a really clever way to use something visual, or I guess the lack of it in this case, to represent a much bigger idea, right? It makes you wonder, what would it actually be like to live in a world without any color at all? How would that affect you? Your emotions, your whole outlook on life? It's kind of unsettling when you really think about it.
Yeah, could you imagine? Like every day you look out your window and all you see are shades of gray, day in and day out.
Yeah.
I think the story is trying to tell us that in this world, color represents more than just, something pretty to look at. It's tied to hope, to the possibility of change, of something new. And speaking of new, that brings us to the character who really shakes things up in Monoton.
Oh yeah, here we go.
Her name is Chroma, and she is not exactly a wallflower. Let's just say she enters the story like a burst of confetti. We're talking hair like a sunset, clothes that practically glow. She's like the embodiment of everything Monoton is not.
A classic disruptor.
Oh.
You see this kind of character a lot in stories, right? That stranger who shows up and forces everyone to re-examine their deepest beliefs, how they live their lives, everything they thought they knew.
It really makes you wonder how we'd react in that situation, right? If a Chroma walked into our lives, would we embrace the change or cling to what's familiar? But here's where it gets even more interesting. It's not just that Chroma brings color with her. The story actually describes her as almost awakening color wherever she goes. Flowers bloom when she passes by. The sky gets a hint of blue in her wake. It's subtle, but it makes you think that maybe Monoton wasn't always this way. Like the potential for color was always there, just dormant, waiting for someone like Chroma to unlock it.
That's such a good point. It's not like she's forcing her colors onto this world. It's more like she's reawakening something that was always there but forgotten, buried beneath the surface.
Yeah, exactly. And, it makes you think about those moments in our own lives when a new perspective, a new experience, it just changes how we see everything. Like something clicks into place and we realize there was this whole other layer to reality that we were blind to before.
That's a great way to put it.
But of course, not everyone in Monoton is thrilled about this sudden splash of color, right? In fact, there's one character in particular who sees it as a threat. Like his whole world is about to be turned upside down. And he's not going to just stand by and let it happen. And the one who's not so happy about all this color is Shade, right? Monoton's photographer.
Yep, that's our guy.
And he's not just like, someone who prefers black and white photography.
Right.
He's almost devout about it.
Yeah, he's intense.
Like black and white is the only way to see the truth, pure and unfiltered, and everything else is just, I don't know, fake or something. What did you think about his perspective? It seemed a little extreme, even for an artist.
I can see why you'd say that. It's easy to just write Shade off as someone who's afraid of change, stuck in his ways. But the story does make you think about where he's coming from, He really believes that color hides the truth, that it's all just a distraction. He thinks black and white strips everything down to its essence, shows you things as they truly are, no sugarcoating.
It's like he finds beauty in the rawness, right? That stark contrast between light and dark.
Absolutely. And that's reflected in his photography, too. The story talks about these really powerful portraits he takes of the townspeople. You could practically feel the weight of their lives, all those experiences etched into their faces.
It's interesting, though, because then we have Chroma, who looks at that same world, those same people, and finds a way to bring them to life with color. It's almost like she's highlighting a different kind of truth, one that's more about hope and what could be.
And that's the heart of the conflict, isn't it?
Yeah.
These two totally different ways of looking at the world. Shade represents tradition, that starkness, finding comfort in what's familiar. Chroma is all about change, pushing boundaries, the excitement of the unknown.
And it gets even more intense because it's not just a theoretical debate about art, right? It gets personal, Clays. Shade feels so threatened by Chroma, by what her arrival represents, that he challenges her to this photographic duel.
Black and white versus color high noon.
Exactly. Each of them has to capture their vision of Monoton, and then the townspeople get to decide who speaks to them more. The stakes are pretty high.
No kidding. It makes you wonder, what is it about these two approaches to art, to life even, that evokes such strong reactions?
Yeah.
If you were suddenly dropped into Monoton, whose work would you be drawn to? The honesty of Shade's black and white, or the hope in Chroma's color?
It's a tough one, honestly. I think they both have their own kind of magic. And that's what I love about this story. It doesn't tell you which side is right or wrong. It shows you the validity of both perspectives. It reminds us that sometimes the most powerful experiences come from embracing different ways of seeing things.
Right. We get so caught up in our own heads sometimes, convinced that our way is the only way. But when we open ourselves up to different perspectives, that's when we really start to grow, you know?
Absolutely. So this duel, this clash of visions, how does it all play out? I imagine things get pretty interesting and monotone.
Oh, yeah. The story describes Shade and Chroma spending a week totally immersed in the town, each one trying to capture its essence through their own lens.
So what do they each focus on?
Shade sticks to his guns, of course. He goes for that raw emotion, capturing the textures of the buildings, the lines on people's faces, the way the light and shadows play off everything. There's a real sense of history in his photos, you know, like the weight of time.
And Chroma.
She takes a totally different approach. She uses color to bring out the life that she sees hidden beneath the surface of Monoton. There's a scene where she photographs these kids playing, and the sky above them is this incredible blue, and it makes you realize how much you take those little pops of color for granted. And there's another one where she captures this old woman, and her face is wrinkled, and she's lived a long life, you can tell, but her eyes are full of life, and she's got this bright red scarf that just pops against the gray of the town.
It sounds like they're both capturing something real about Monoton, but showing it in completely different ways. So how do the townspeople react when they see these two versions of themselves, their lives, laid out before them? Do they pick a side? So they've got these two completely different visions of their town right in front of them. What happens? Do they end up having to choose between Shade and Chroma?
Well, at first, it seems like that's exactly what's going to happen. The story talks about how the whole town is divided.
Makes sense.
Some people, they connect with Shade's photos, the black and white ones. You know, they see their lives, their struggles reflected back at them, and it just hits home.
It's like even if your life hasn't been easy, even if it's been defined by this lack of color, seeing it acknowledged, validated like that, it's got to be powerful.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But then you have these other people, and they're drawn to Chroma's work. All the color and vibrancy. It's like she's showing them a world they never dared to dream of, full of possibility. And that sparks something in them, a sense of hope.
It's like when you travel to a new place, right? And all of a sudden your senses are going crazy, all these new sights, new sounds, you even smell things differently. And it makes you realize that your way of seeing things, it's not the only way. And there's this whole vast world out there that you never even knew existed.
And that's what Chroma represents to these people,
Yeah.
right? That sense of possibility, of something more than what they've always known.
So we've got this town on the verge of tearing itself apart. Two sides, two ways of seeing the world, and it seems like there's no middle ground. How does the story resolve this?
Well, right when the tension is at its highest, the town elder steps in. This is like the wisest person in Monoton, someone who's seen it all.
Okay, yeah, what do they say? Because it's got to be something pretty profound to bridge that kind of divide.
And it is, but it's also incredibly simple. The elder just looks at everyone and asks, why must we choose? Just like that.
Wow. Talk about cutting through the noise. It's like we're hardwired for this us versus them mentality, right? Like we have to pick a side, especially when it comes to our deepest beliefs. We forget that maybe, just maybe, there's another way, a way to find common ground, to see the value in both perspectives.
Exactly. And what's amazing is that the tan listens. The story ends with Monoton finding a way to embrace both Shade's work and Chroma's work. They don't have to choose one or the other.
So it's not about black and white OR color, it's about black and white AND color. It's about recognizing that both have something valuable to offer. That's a message we could all use a little more of these days.
No kidding. It makes you think, what if we approached all our disagreements that way, especially the ones that seem impossible to solve? What if, instead of trying to prove the other side wrong, we started asking, why must we choose? What if we focused on building bridges instead of walls?
It's a powerful thought, and it's a great place to wrap up our deep dive today. So to all our listeners out there, we hope this conversation has inspired you to be a little more open, a little more curious, and maybe even a little more willing to embrace the beauty of different perspectives. And who knows, it might just lead you to see the world in a whole new light. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.